Hey, good evening. This is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. Hey AJ, thank you for moderating the stream again. Always nice to see you on the jet. Today you are golden for me. And hi ZD Radar. Very nice to see you. What are you saying? Die Deutsche Bahn hat eigentlich nur vier Probleme. Frühling, Sommer, Herbst und Winter. German Railway has only four problems. Spring, summer, autumn and winter. Well, I think this is true for most of us. Is it the same what people say about the Czech railway? Well, I always have to repeat, they are doing a great job at all the railways in the world, and the more we play in this game and the more we learn about the stuff that you need to master in running trains on time, the more my respect grows for people who actually do that. And I found this on the internet as well. Yeah, well, it's always easy to make fun if something doesn't work what you are not responsible for. Well, before we start, please respect the disclaimer. We are talking about playing a computer game, running trains on a simulator. We try to understand the regulatory and technical concepts involved as thoroughly as possible, as much as we can do that as noobs and dilettantes and people who are just interested and have fun knowing more about driving trains, but please leave the real trains and the real railway installations alone, because it is dangerous and it is annoying if trains are late, because you can hear the guy saying on the PA, train will be late because there are people on the track. Yeah. Okay. We're going on with the French stuff today. Last week we talked about the stop sequence in the French color light system, the Code Verlan, and the power change setup, and today we are talking about the in-cab signaling, the TVM-430 or TVM-430. Not the French. Why are you saying not the French, AJ? What is wrong with the French? Obviously we're talking about the French. In-cab signaling. The really... Okay. Anyway, even if HA does object, we are doing French in-cab signaling on the TGV. And for that, we are jumping into our service. The service that I picked is one that I have not driven. Yeah, there is actually a TVM video about the about running it in Great Britain, but I wanted to make a TVM video about running it in France as well. And obviously it is the same system, so there are a lot of similarities, but some peculiarities there are for the French system that you don't find in the British system or in the British implementation of the TVM-430. So this is why I allowed myself to make this thing comprehensive and have a French TVM-430 video as well. I will get back to the differences. And what the TGV in the game actually can do is a self-test for the TVM-430 system. I think at least I've never tried if the Javelin is able to do that. Maybe it is. So today I picked a service that is supposed to run in August, so that we probably or maybe don't get any thunderstorm for a change. I turn on the safety system by hand. The Crocodile, the TVM-430, the KVB and the Vakma, and then after we have... Can I do that? Yes, acknowledge. This for the KVB, I set the TVM in test and sit back down, and then we can already see the self-test mode of the TVM-430 system running through our cap display. We're setting up the power. I want some lights in my cap. Going through the safe test for the brake system. All works well. Oh, did I press it again? Releasing the brakes works. What is the second line for? Actually, I wondered. I think it is just a redundancy. In case that something breaks or malfunctions in the first line, you always have the second line. But this is also only a guess. I don't know for sure if that is for that or for something else. But I have never seen the second line in action, except for the self-test. So, just as we know it from the Javelin, if we have white numerals on black ground, we have a speed limit that is lower than the line speed that we have on this piece of track. What happens if we go back to line speed? We already know that we get white numerals on green squares, and then we can be sure that there is no speed restriction active and we can run full line speed. We're starting in Avignon today and running towards Marseille with a stop in Aix-en-Provence. Let's have some lights for the tunnel. And the first part of the journey is, now that the signals switched to line speed 300, it's quite relaxing. All that we have to do is to balance the speed after we reached line speed with our power lever, playing between power and dynamic brakes. What we can see in the scenery are the repères, they are called in French, the TVM block markers flying by with yellow triangles always pointing to the track that they apply to. You can see that some of them are have markers with an F, and some have markers with an NF. That is a difference to the British system, if only a small difference. I have to admit that in the British implementation you have P and N markers, and we have NF and F markers in France instead. Just as we have them on the color light signals to distinguish the carré signals from the semaphore signals. I think I did answer, but what do you mean? Which question? Do you think I did not answer yet? The second line thing, yeah. I think it is a redundancy thing, the second line in the display. Because we always get our indications on the first line of these indicators, and there is the second line, and in the self-test on the second line there is always the same indication that appears on the first line. So I think it is just a redundancy system in case that the indicator lights or indicator squares in the first line go dark, malfunction, get broken or whatever. If you know more about that, please let me know in the comments. Line speed climbed to 320. What is convenient because we almost hit the 300 mark, so we can just keep on accelerating. Now we are getting close to the speed limit, and now it is balancing on the power handle. And the power handle in the game, in my opinion, it is very soft, so it is just tapping the keys on the keyboards for more power, less power, more dynamic brakes, less dynamic brakes. Slightly faster than the steam train. Yes, AJ, you are spoiling it. Next week I want to play Steam for the first time, and I've been digging deep into how to run a steam locomotive, especially without using the HUD, if you don't have a speed clock on the locomotive. But this is what it is supposed to happen next Sunday. AJ can't wait for the steam engines. Well, next Sunday we will have steam engines. And we have quite a long presentation about, well, the general principle and what you can do with the regulator and the reverser and the cylinder cocks and that stuff. And what it actually does. So in case I have not mentioned this before, I find it extremely relaxing driving this TGV on those high speed lines. Tapping your power handle, applying a bit more power, and just watching the landscape fly by. And this, on this DLC, this is one of the few DLCs I think where you can actually see the gradients ahead of you. Can see whether you're running uphill, whether you're running downhill, if there is a hill in front of you or a dell. And sometimes reacting to little spikes in the speed with adding a small amount of the PLB, the poussoir bouton locomotive air brakes. And after Sire Moon left a quite comprehensive comment about how to use the brakes on the TGV, I try to do it the way that he suggested. In case of speed reductions that we are getting on our TVM. So that most of the time we should be good using the dynamic brake that you can address with the power handle alone. And only if that is not enough, I will add some PBL brakes. And again, I don't know if this is an archetypal thing to do or a prototypical thing to do. Just max out the dynamic brake that you can address with the power handle And if that's not enough, apply more brakes with the PBL system. In the game, at least, this works like a charm. Really, really very nicely. So I think we're now getting close to the part of the track where we get announced a reduction in track speed limit to 300. And then we will do it the way that Sire Moon suggested it. As soon as we get flashing indications on our in-cab aspect indicator thingy, we will aim for slowing down to the next applicable step, so that we will think 2 blocks ahead and try to adapt our speed. This is the last bridge before we get to a tunnel, and then after this tunnel we will be running downhill, and conveniently we get the first indication that we are approaching a speed limit to 300. Here. So the 320 is flashing. That means not on the next block, but on the second block after the block that we are aiming for or running towards, we will get a reduction to 300. See? Now we got one more block ahead, and now at the next marker we will get a 300 limit. And we anticipate that and slow down to the 300 already when we see the aspects flashing. And this is a part of the track where we need the PBL brakes, because the dynamic brakes alone are not enough. So, at this point, I can bring in my presentation and read the long questions on the chat. What was that sign for again? The blue one with the yellow triangle. I keep seeing it, and I know you told us last week, but I forgot. I will get to this in the presentation, AJ. No problem. For example, we are not allowed to combine brakes in the metro because the wheels could get stuck. If we start braking with the air brake, we only have to brake with it. Oh, that's interesting to know. I have never heard that it is not allowed to mix brakes on certain trains. But we should talk about what brakes there actually are then on the tracks. But I asked Sire Moon if that is on the TGV, a thing that after applying the dynamic brake with a power handle, the PBL brake actually blends in even more dynamic brakes first before it applies the air brakes, and he answered in the affirmative and said that is the case. And I think you can see that on the brake gauges as well, that applying some PBL brake actually does not fill the air brake cylinders with pressure, but slows down the train even more. Well, yeah. Why I wanted to do a stream about the TVM-430 system for the French signaling for the TGV is especially because it's the French who invented the system. So I think it is just right that there is a video about the French implementation of it, and not only the implementation that runs in the UK. And actually there are some differences, and so it makes sense in my opinion to look at it again. And yeah, on the left side you can see all the texts that I looked into, especially this arrêté, what is, well, obviously some kind of a law where the basic principles of the signaling system are laid out. This is where I got my limited knowledge about the French color light signals. And then I found a document issued by the SNCF Réseau, what is obviously the part or that subsidiary of the French railway carrier SNCF, that is in charge of the network and all the infrastructure, a bit like Network Rail in the UK or the DB Netz AG in Germany. And they issue some experimentary documents that lay out the principles that are in this arrêté even more, and add some more well regulations that the drivers have to obey. And this obviously gives you some more information about how stuff is actually done. So what is the principle of a signaling system, an in-cab signaling system like the TVM-430? What is in French transmission voie machine, track to train transmission? It replaces the color light signals that usually limit a block on our tracks with those thingies. AJ, you asked about them, the TVM block marker. So they replace a signal, they give you an indication in the real world where the block ends and the next one begins, or a half block or a segment, more or less. Well, let's call it a block, so that you actually can look out of your window and see where a certain aspect starts to apply and where it stops to apply. And those are called, as I already said, a repère in French. And what those signals are supposed to tell you, the aspects you can see in your cab display, but where they start to apply and where they stop to apply, for that you have those markers in the real world. And then you can see the marker, and obviously there are no lights on it. It is always the same sign, but what this particular marker in front of your nose is supposed to say, for that you have to look on your display in your train. And so that you know that you are entering a piece of track where this signaling system is used, just as we have seen that on the Javelin stream. You get it announced by signs of that kind that tells you cab, what is nice because it's like cab signaling in English, and signalisation de cabine en French. So it is a good abbreviation for the French word as well as for the English word, and they can use the same sign without any problem. If it is black letters on white background, it is the announcement sign, and you get it, at least this is what is said in this document issued by the SNCF Réseau. You get it typically 3 times as a reminder, and then you get the white on black one, and this is where it actually starts. So from this point on, you won't be getting any color light signals but the TVM block markers, and what you get on your signaling display in your cab is what you have to go by. A funny thing that I actually read is, if you are passing a signal or a sign of that kind, and the TVM system is displaying to you a speed limit of, I don't know, higher than 170, I forgot the number actually, then you have to apply an emergency brake as once, because it is something is wrong. So if you enter this zone and get a clear 320 at once, then you are not allowed to trust it. This is the sign at the end. It looks slightly different from the British one. The British one is, if you look in the driver's handbook issued by the RSSB, it is black on white with a red cross on top of it. In the French rules, it is defined as white on black with 1 red stroke across it, and then you know you're back into color light territory. Um, the French block markers, the French repères, are designated with F and NF signs for franchisable and non franchisable, passable and not passable. We have seen it on the Javelin stream as well. In the British implementation, those signs are replaced by P and N. In France, those signs surprise nobody because all the signals come with designators of that kind, typically that tell you if a red light on this signal is a carré, meaning you are not allowed to pass, stop and stay, or whether it is a semaphore light, what allows you to pass after stopping with caution, with limited speed. For that, we have discussed this in the stream last week, and if you want to know more about it, please watch the video about the color light stop sequence signaling. There we discuss all the different kinds of stop signals in the French color light system. One thing that we do not know from the British implementation is that an NF marker in the French system also has the possibility to show a white light, just like the color light NF signals that typically show a carré with two red lights can light an additional white light called the œilleton, the eyepiece, or the peephole, or something like that would be the translation, and then you are actually allowed to pass this marker, even if it is a marker designated with a non franchisable sign, and your in-cab signaling device is displaying a stop indication to you. You have to push an override button for this, a bit similar like the Befehl 40, the PCB override on German trace, or there is a lot of implementations that have this, that you can pass a red signal after you have been allowed to do so by pushing a certain key on your train, so that the safety system does not stop you. What I'm not exactly sure if this white light is called an œilleton on those block markers designated NF, or if it is just a feu blanc, a white light that we know from shunting services, more or less the shunting signals that allow you to pass. It is not really specified in the rules, at least I have not found it, but since it is more or less the same principle that you have on the color light NF red signals, I think it is safe to say that this is an œilleton. And in the game you can actually see those plates where you can display the white light additionally on the NF TVM block markers. I have never seen one lit though. I have not played all the services that are in the game and in the DLC, obviously, but so far I have excuse me, so far I have not encountered any situation where we had to stop at an NF block marker and then were allowed by the dispatcher to pass it by lighting the œilleton, or the white light that comes with it. But the implementations are there. Another thing that you can encounter on a TVM block marker, what we do not know in the British implementation, is this thing. We have seen it in the stream and last week and the video about the color light signaling. This is la bande lumineuse jaune horizontale, the illuminating yellow horizontal ribbon, or whatever you might call it, that indicates that you are entering a block that is shorter for whatever reason than you typically would expect, be it because the block is actually shorter before it ends, be it because there is a train sitting in the block already and you are supposed to enter it. This one we can see in the game, and hopefully we will see it later when we have to stop at Aix-en-Provence. On the track for the opposite direction, there is an installation where you can show this short track indicator together with the TVM block marker when the train is in there. So this does not only come with entry signals in the color light signaling system, but can also work with the TVM block marker. Another kind of marker that you can find and we sometimes pass on our journey here from Avignon to Marseille are those funny things. In the British implementation, they have things of that kind too, but they look a bit different. They are not a perfect diamond, a losange, I think it is the shape, the name for the shape in French. But in the British system, you have one side of it like built like a square, and it has one point on one side. And yeah, those points actually, those triangles here on my presentation here, they point to the right. In real life and in the game, you can find them pointing to the right and to the left, or even to the bottom, and they always tell you to what track they are applicable to. And also this yeah, purple thingy, also here this chevron is pointing to the track that it applies to. And we always get this if there is some sort of siding or wherever you can perform some shunting movement. And this is a marker for that. It is called a jaune de manœuvre, and shunt entry boards, they are called in the British rule book, and they tell you that there is a shunt entry, so you can go to siding or some kind of track where you can perform shunting movements. And in the rules, if you just look in the arrêté, they tell you that you always have to stop in front of those markers. I have looked around a bit, but there is actually not a rule in the arrêté telling you that you can pass it if you are not a shunting service, but you find a regulation of that kind in this document issued by the SNCF Réseau, if I understood the French correctly, telling you that you only have to stop in front of a jaune de manœuvre if you are a shunting service. And then you can be allowed to pass it if the white light gets lit. You have to stop, then the white light gets lit, and then you can actually enter if you are a shunting service. But for us, not being a shunting service on the line, we can just pass it, because obviously it does not make any sense if we are going there with 300 or 320 and passing a thing like this or approaching a sign like this, and then we have to stop and check if someone lit the white light or not. So this is only for shunting movements. We are not supposed to be confused by that, just to make it comprehensive. And then we can look at the indications that our display unit is showing us. This is quite and very much like the indications that you can see on the British implementation on the Javelin. If you got white numerals on black ground, no diamonds, then this is the current speed limit and it is below the line speed. So you are actually in a speed limit reduced speed at this point, and typically when you're starting, you're getting a reduced speed. When you're entering a cap signaling territory piece of track, then you get a reduced speed first. If you proceed on, and then you can get the full line speed numerals, and then they are on green. That means there is no speed restriction active. You are allowed to go full line speed. If on green background, no speed limit, line speed. If you get the black numerals on white losanges, on white diamonds, then you get the additional information that on the next block marker you will have to adhere to the speed limit shown on the diamonds. You can still proceed with the indication that was shown before, but on the next block marker you have to be below. And the rules say quite clearly you have to slow down as fast as possible to this speed. So you can't just think, okay, there is so much way to go to the next marker, I will start applying the brakes later. You are supposed to slow down at once and then make sure that you actually hit the next block marker with no higher speed than the one that is indicated. And then all those aspects can carry a second piece of information. If they are flashing, they are not only telling you about the speed limit that is in the block that you are running in, and not the one that is applicable on the next block. But they also tell you that on the second block marker, in the second block after the one that you are running in at the moment, there will be a lower speed limit than the one that you are actually running in, or that is indicated in case of the diamonds. So if they are flashing, then you have an advanced warning that the second block marker will have another speed limit for you that you will have to adhere to. And from what Saya Moon commented under my last week's video, obviously, or apparently, it is that drivers are supposed to start slowing down, anticipating the second speed limit already. So if you are getting a flashing 170, for example, then you're not slowing down only to 170, but you are already slowing down to the next step. What is typically, you know, the sequence of speed limits that you encounter. That would be then 140 or 130 or 120. It's actually not quite clear to me what numbers there can be shown. In some sources it is very limited to a certain set of numbers, but in the game we have numbers that are not in this catalog, and if you are watching videos of TVM-430 trains, there you can see some numbers that are not in this catalog. So this might differ from different implementations of the system, actually, what numbers you can see. But when you're running on a specific line, then you know the sequence that you are getting. Like when you're running 320 and it starts flashing, then you know it will be on the next marker, it will be a limit to 300, and then 270, and then 230. So you can actually anticipate that and use the dynamic brake to slow down accordingly. If you're supposed to stop at the next marker, you will get this indication: black zeros with a red inner part on a white diamond on red ground. And this indication tells you that you have to stop at the next block marker that is an NF marker. If you pass an F block marker before that, you don't have to stop at, you can stop at it and proceed then at 30 kilometers per hour, but you have to stop and stay at the next block marker that shows an NF sign. And if you're passing, for example, the F marker and go on with 30, then you will get all red indications telling you that you're limited to 30 kilometers per hour and have to stop at the next NF sign. If you passed an NF sign, obviously, then this indication tells you to stop now as soon as possible. There will be a penalty brake, and if you don't adhere to the speed limits that are signaled, but there is some leeway, and this leeway increases with the speed actually that is shown. So on higher speeds, the leeway that the system gives you is higher than on slower speeds. So if you're limited to 30, you will get the penalty brake. If you're exceeding the 35, for example, on 300, I think it is 330 or 335 that you can actually run until you get a penalty brake. So there is some sort of leeway for you, so that you don't get a penalty brake too easily. CD Raider, what do you say? Not in the game though. Did you try to pass a red signal in the game and you did not get reds? In this case, I actually have not tried it. Passing a stop indication and watch getting. You can pass F. You can't pass F. Even if you are. Oh, you have to tell me what service that is, where you actually get a stop indication at an F marker. I would like to see and investigate that. Maybe you have to contact the signaler first before the game lets you pass. Sometimes this happens. I don't know, you tried it in Great Britain. Yeah, that might actually be the case. But this is how it is supposed to work. If it is implemented in the game correctly, then it is always hard to test this, because the game spats you out and kicks you out if you are actually trying to pass a signal that is requiring you to stop. And those stop and proceed on site indications, they are not easy to reproduce them in the game. Well, but that is that, more or less. So there are some differences to the British implementation, but in general, the system obviously works the same way. And we can go back to our train. I think there is no service in France that would stop you by F sign, only with off-the-rails custom scenario. Yeah, that is always the thing with the off-the-rails custom scenario. And then the signaling system in the game has to work, really, even though you are in the off-the-rails custom scenario. So, our indication is a 300 line speed. And soon enough we will get into the part of the track where we are flagged down to stop in Aix-en-Provence. We are still running uphill here, but very soon there will be a quite steep descent. I always need to be cautious that you don't go into overspeed, because here you are going full throttle uphill and then it's going down and your dynamic brakes won't be enough. Across the tip of the hill here. Into the full moon, as it seems. And now it's going down. And if you don't anticipate and use the PBL brake here, then you will most probably go into overspeed. Then there is a bridge, and after the bridge there is another descent. We have maximum dynamic brakes and we're still accelerating. And now we get the flashing 300. That means no change at the next block marker, but on the block marker after that we will be limited to 270. So the next indication will be 270 on diamonds, most probably flashing, because we are getting slowed down to Aix-en-Provence. The 270 is flashing again, meaning on the next block marker we will be slowed down to 230. So the next one after the one that we are approaching right now. Here's the marker book. and we are on a 270. Next one will be a 230 and the one after a 200. So we're already aiming for the 200. Since we're at 200 now, we can release the brakes a bit. Here comes the marker. Zack. And the next one will be 200. It is still flashing. So we are adapting to 170 or 160. This is sometimes not quite clear. It's 170, so 170 and 80 are, from what I have read, the two indications that can drop to a full stop zeros on red at the next signal. So I'm not sure if we are getting an indication of a different kind in between, but it is probable and totally okay that the next indication will be full zeros. We will see. Yes. So we are supposed to stop at the next marker and the next marker. I would get back to what you just wrote on the chat, CD Radar. Just let me do the stop first, so that I don't miss my station, since it is the only stop. That would be a bit annoying. But it's a good point. That would be funny if I missed the only stop that we have. But I don't want to do that. I'm always happy to humor you. Aix-en-Provence, the station of tomorrow. Why do I say the station of tomorrow? Because this is what the station says about itself. Come on, train, sneak into parking position. That's okay. Now we're sitting here in Aix-en-Provence. We have 1 minute to show stuff. This is Bienvenue dans la gare de demain. Welcome to the station of tomorrow. And what I wanted to show you while we are waiting for our passengers to board is the Bande lumineuse jaune horizontale on this F marker here. So even though there is no train sitting in this platform here, you're getting shown the short track indicator. If that is as it is supposed to be, I can't tell you. But at least this is what is happening here. I always forget to set the brake neutral switch back. When starting again, signal cleared and is giving us a limit of 170. What makes sense after starting. Here when passing this marker you can see that thing that is supposed to be able to show the white bouton that allows you to pass it even if your cab signaling system is showing you a stop indication. And now coming back to your question, so the TVM is reading some impulses from rails themselves, no balises, no magnet, etc. From what I understand, yes, it is actually a bit like the pulse code cab signaling system that we have on the northeastern corridor, for example, but a bit more complex. From what I've read, there are 4 carrier frequencies that the train reads next to each other, and those 4 carrier sequences or frequencies are used to send starter telegrams that are coded in a specific way, and then this gets interpreted by a Motorola 68020 processor and a weird set of relays. I had half a mind of looking into it more closely and discussing it, but it is, in my opinion, too complex. It made sense on the pulse code cab signaling on the northeastern corridor. We have a couple of videos about that on the channel, but for the TVM I found it was too complex. The sequence that we just experienced was 170, and then from 170 white on black numerals it fell on 230 flashing on diamonds. So we did not get a green indication in between, because the piece of track where we can actually go the 300 was too short. It was only 1 block because the next block was already a reduction to 270. Heading to what Sire Moon said, I should slow down to 170 now. I need the PBL brake because the dynamic is not fast enough, even to 160. But you can see the 160 on diamonds is not flashing anymore, so the 160 will stay at the next block. We don't need to slow down even more. So there's the next marker. We will get the 160 white on black. Not flashing, no further limit indicated, because we are actually approaching the end of the TVM signaling track. And for that I just wanted to put on the presentation once more and recap the power change sequence that we have to go through at the end of the cab signaling section. This is just a recap from last week, this time going into the opposite direction. So how does it work with the power change? We have seen that we get first this sign. Actually we get it twice when we're running here, and we are getting it here actually. Last week we could not actually see it because I did not find it, at least coming the other way around. Now we're actually getting the sign twice on both ends of the tunnel walls, and this is warning us that we have to lower our pantograph soon. on this sign, the pantograph needs to be lowered. We cannot pass this sign with the pantograph up, otherwise we will cause sparks and arcs and mayhem. So at this point, the section with the pantograph lowered starts and it ends here, and at the same time this sign can tell us what power system is working beyond this sign. And last week we have seen the 15,000 DC TGV line that starts there, and now we're going into the 1500. I said this wrong in last week's video a couple of times. It's obviously not 15,000 but 1500 volts DC current that we are getting from the overhead catenary when we are driving into the Marseille station area. And then when we are passing the ref sign, then we are allowed to go back to normal and switch on our main circuit breaker again. So between those two signs, the pantograph needs to be lowered until the end of train has passed this sign. And then we still have to wait until the tip of the train has passed the ref sign to switch on the main circuit breaker again. So when we get those signs, we can prepare, we can do the off-on main circuit breaker flip so that the main circuit breaker gets actually turned off. We can then lower the pantograph so that it is lowered when we pass this sign here, and then the pantograph needs to stay down until the train has passed fully this sign here. And in the meantime, we can use the time to select our power mode. After the train has passed this sign, when we are sure that this happened, we can raise the pantograph again, and when the tip of the train passed the ref sign, we can hit the rearm main circuit breaker and go back to normal procedure. And this is what we are doing now. So watch out, the next sign that we will be getting most probably is the announcement sign. Here, announcement sign 1. So what we do, flip-flop, we can put our brakes to max, then we lower our pantograph, we set the mode to DC. We just pass the end cap signaling system sign, you could see it there, the second lower pantograph sign. When we're passing the next color light signal, there is a limit to 140. The dynamic brake with the power handle actually works even if the main circuit breaker is off and the pantograph is lowered. For some reason, it just works. Getting closer to the ref sign, raising the pantograph again. Here on the left is the ref sign. Pantograph is up, we arm it back, and we have power and can accelerate. Because CD Radar asks why it would not work, why the dynamic brake should not work if we have no connection with the overhead catenary. On the trains on the northeastern corridor, for example, if you turn off your main circuit breaker, you can't use your dynamic brake anymore. I think this is determined by the way that your dynamic brake actually works. If you need a connection to your overhead catenary to get rid of the current that you're producing with your dynamic brake, then obviously you can't use it if your pantograph is down. If you have a kind of a dynamic brake that just burns the energy somewhere, like the dynamic brake on the old diesel electrics on Sandpatch Grade, that just blows off the heat generated from the braking energy on rheostats, then obviously you don't need a connection to the overhead catenary. And here the dynamic brake that you can address with your power brake handle works, even though the pantograph is down. There will be a 110 limit at the next signaling bridge. Just made it like this. The crocodile system is warning us about a speed reduction to 60 at the signaling bridge when we are entering the Marseille station area, so I'm keeping the brakes on and slowing down further. Here is the 60, and the next one will be a limit to 30 at the entry signals actually. On the entry signals, when we're going into the Marseille station area, you can see the yellow ribbon, the Bande, lumineuse, jaune, horizontale on carré signals. There on the left. We are getting the avertissement, the yellow signal, and here on the carrés left to us, on our left, there is the yellow band again. If that is prototypical that the yellow band is shown with red signals that you can't pass, I don't know. You don't necessarily need the information that the track is short if the signal is red anyway. But maybe it is lit in case that someone lights the horizontale and you can pass the track. But then you have to go on site anyway. If someone knows more about that, please let me know in the comments. This is something that I could not find out. Oh, in Aix-en-Provence we did not lower our lights when we entered the station. This time I remembered. So running from Avignon to Marseille, I think it is totally possible to stay on the timetable, even when doing the one block ahead slowdown procedure that Moon suggested. Then you are more or less just on track. On time, I should say. And by the way, if I managed to stop my train properly, then this should have been a perfect run. At least point-wise. I just said this to jinx it. Yeah, but I think that was that. Doors unlocked. Is the text in the lower right corner correct for this service? What is it saying? Yeah, I think it is correct. What does it say? It says TGV 6 Marseille St. Yeah, it is correct. Thank you for paying attention, but I think it is correct. So, here our TGV Duplex 200 is stationed in Marseille St. And actually we have some passengers left that are exiting the train.
Nous demandons aux passagers de ne pas laisser leurs colis ou bagages sans surveillance. Tout colis ou bagage laissé sans surveillance pourrait être retiré sans avertissement ou faire l'objet d'une...
And the nice lady is telling you that you should not leave your luggage unattended, otherwise it will be exploded immediately. Yeah, that was that. The service for today, the TVM-430 in the French implementation, and maybe a bit more realistically running the train using the dynamic brakes for anticipating the speed reductions that are signaled by the TVM system. Thank you again, Moon, for leaving a comment of that kind, and keep on doing this, please. I thank you, AJ, for moderating my stream. I thank you for your input, See the Radar, once more. I always enjoy having you on the stream. Next week, as AJ already spoiled, we will look at the LMS Stanier 8F steam locomotive and run around some freight services on the Spirit of Steam DLC for the first time. I invested some time yesterday building a presentation, and it will be interesting if you like it. And I practiced running a steam engine. This is obviously in the game it is super easy compared to real life, but it is still much more complicated than driving at tracks 2, for example. So thank you very much once more. Have a nice week. Take care and see you around next Sunday. Bye bye.